I like speaking about Taghi, as you all know. As for me, like for so many of you, he was truly a best friend and the inspirer for the work we all did together. Maybe for some of you who haven't met him, it would be good also to highlight that he was an intellectual, that he was an activist, that he truly dedicated his work to big ideas and the connections with people that make those ideas alive. So I would like to recall three main movements that really were led from within by Taghi together with others, and then tell you what united those movements, at least in my perspective. The first movement was the one that in the 60s and 70s started a very important critical analysis of so-called development, of the large-scale enterprises that went under the name of development and were supposed to be absolutely positive no matter what. Well, Taghi did his PhD research under the guidance of Barry Commoner in the 60s and 70s. He actually did it on the pesticide residues in mother's milk in plantation workers in Guatemala. And he was one of the first to really point at something that now we all see more clearly, that there are all these undesired consequences of these major scale development enterprises in terms of the environment, in terms of health and social consequences. And the volume that he worked on together with others, but he was the chief editor of, is called the Tireless Technology, Ecology and International Development. That volume really opened the eyes of many people, me included. At that time, I did not know Taghi, but I read a good part of this volume. So it was the time in which there was an arrogant sense of presumptuousness. We are developing, we are going ahead, and Taghi and many others in the UN Stockholm Conference of '72 and in the Rio Conference on Environment and Development of '92 truly pointed at the fact that we were also losing a lot, not only making big gains, and we should be stopping being only arrogant and presumptuous. Of course, he managed to influence generations of thinkers, but also to make lots of enemies. And it was at that time that I think he learned to speak without fear, ever. In fact, he also went through the civil rights movement in the United States. He was there because, as you know, he was born in Iran, but he was in the US for his studies. And there he participated in the civil rights movements and demonstration, was beaten. Really, he had the true, full, adventurous life of those years. After his studies, he went back to Iran, and in Iran he helped found the Department of the Environment, and also what is now one of the oldest and most experienced NGOs in Iran for issues of environment and development, which is Senesta. That is the major visible representation of what he has done in Iran. And in fact, with Senesta, he started this second movement that I would like to talk to you about, which is the one to foster the respect and the recognition of the unique ways of life, unique wisdom of mobile indigenous peoples. I mean, Taghi fought to recognize the rights of mobile indigenous peoples to remain mobile, to maintain those capacities, skills, and the wisdom that allow people to be in a non-destructive and often a beneficial, positive relationship with very difficult semi-arid and arid environments that are far from conditions of equilibrium and can only be dealt with in the flexible skills and capacities of mobility. Taghi did so by demonstrating things not only in Iran but in other countries, and by participating and leading international movements for the recognitions of these beneficial results of mobility. Just to tell you a few, I mean, he participated in the development of the Dana Declaration in 2002, and then in 2003 we started working together for the World Pars Congress in Durban, where we managed to pull together the very first gathering of mobile indigenous peoples from very many regions who could present their case in front of the World Parks Congress. In that occasion, he also created the World Alliance of Mobile Indigenous Peoples, for which he served as the first Secretary General. This WAMIP, World Alliance, participated in meetings and conference of the parties of the CBDs and the IUCN, where Taghi was chair of one of the key commission, the Commission on Environmental, Economic and Social Policies, and brought those instances there in CBDs, in IUCN. And of course, you may imagine that international policy influence is made only of glamorous events in international arena, but this was not so at all. While in Iran, Taghi truly had to face plenty of difficulties. Initially, under the Shah, he was persecuted, he was blacklisted, he was threatened, he was impeded to leave the country for many years, and even impeded to work inside the country because he was considered to work in a too participatory way. He managed to, at a certain point, to leave and go to work in Sudan with mobile indigenous peoples there. And when the regime of the Shah fell, he went back to Iran, and even there, under the Islamic Revolution, he was jailed. He was jailed because he had advocated for autonomy for some Kurdish mobile tribes in the Zagros Mountains. So the hardship was not only political, it was also economic. While in Iran, out of jail, he managed to organize a major conference on nomadism and development with Senesta. And the government had promised to provide the resources for the conference, but then they didn't. So Senesta had advanced the resources, and for years they had to scrap the bottom of the barrel just to pay for what was not being paid back to them. Let me now talk about the third movement that Taghi really led from within, and it is the movement for the appropriate recognition and support to what we call today territories of life, which are the territories and the areas that are governed, managed, and conserved by indigenous peoples and local communities throughout the world. Now, we call them at the beginning community conserved areas, then ICCAs, indigenous and community conserved areas. The term that I prefer really is territories of life. And Taghi was truly instrumental to pull this phenomenon to the attention of international policy and national policy as well. And he did so as 3 times elected president of the ICCA Consortium, which is one, I understand, of the many organizers of your conference, and I'm sure you'll hear about this from Holly and Hugo and many others. Now, what Taghi did in the movement was really to call attention to the strong bond, the ties that connect communities, indigenous peoples and communities to their territories. It is a tie that is not only made of rights. It is made of wisdom. It is made of knowledge, capacities to govern and manage the institutions that really have been tried and tested throughout so many years, and it is made of collective responsibility, not only collective rights. And if I can pass on something to you from him in terms of the ICCA Consortium focus, I would like to say that yes, you may want to focus on collective rights, but also please on collective responsibilities. What is the link between these 3 movements that I mentioned to you? In my understanding, it is the allegiance that Taghi really felt very deeply, the respect, the passion he had for the wisdom and the multiple values of traditional human community. All his life, he worked and found amazing pleasure in working with traditional communities all over the world. In Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in Europe. And what he did was to be with them before providing any advice, any leadership on about anything. He truly focused on organizing people, but for what they themselves considered good and important to achieve in their lives. What he would highlight and strengthen is the sense of their accomplishment. Yes, communities are not perfect. Change may be desired, but change should be coming from within, as Taghi always stressed, not be imposed from outside. And this is nowhere better represented than in Iran with the Uni-Nomad and Uni-Camel, which are a federation of mobile indigenous pastoralists that are active, and thank goodness still active well after Taghi left the planet, for their own self-understanding and their own self-determination in the country, and for better policies to support them. I talked about the traditional communities, but we should not forget that he was also helping Iran to develop his first Department of the Environment, or he helped found a couple of universities, including the Avicenna University in Iran, where he was vice rector for a while. He also participated in writing and wrote many important works that are left from him. What possibly many of us will remember above and beyond everything, his lifestyle. He was exclusively vegetarian. He was always barefoot in attitude, but also in lack of shoes. And personally, he was non-violent, absolutely non-competitive. And possibly this is the reason why he never received an award, despite all the things he managed to do in his life. And in fact, if I well remember, he even forgot to ask for reimbursement after he had advanced things, including for travel, because he was always ahead. He was always thinking about new ideas and new things to do, not really caring about himself. If I have to pull it together into a few words, I would say that Taghi was, in one, the wisest person you probably have ever met, the person able to say the perfect word at the perfect time, and a child able to irritate you, able to really not do what he needs to be doing at that time, and like the wisest person, like a child, the most lovable person you can think of. I hope you all feel in this meeting that he is with you and is proud of you, and I'm sure he's wishing to all of you the best in your work. I do it too, and I hope you have a very successful conference. All the best.